Hello there, my friends. Good evening. Welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. I'm Anthony Murphy. This is episode number 176 of Live Irish Myths. Tonight we are talking about the King of Leinster, Dermot McMurrough, and the coming of the Anglo-Normans. Straying a little bit outside of the mythological realm, this is what we might consider more modern history and 12th century AD. However, I think you'll find the story fascinating, as I did when I first encountered it. You're all very welcome to the live stream. Crowd on into the library, grab yourselves a comfortable chair, something to sit on, make yourselves at home, as you always do. And we are broadcasting simultaneously on the Mythical Ireland YouTube channel and also on the Mythical Ireland Facebook page. Somebody might also share the stream to the Mythical Ireland community group. If you could do that, I'd be greatly grateful. I'd be delighted. Anyway, you're all very welcome. Hope everybody's keeping well. It's another Monday, and here we are, more than 2 years on from when this all started. Hope everybody is in good form. If you're dropping in, please do say hello. Please do have the chat, the bants. Conch agus crack guaranteed, and that's C-R-A-I-C, just in case somebody got the wrong idea. Salav is the first one in the house tonight. Gahintak Salav Fáilte Roat Goji on Laurelin Shu Conasatatu Macarja. Alan Hoskins is in a blustery Ballina Killaloo, and I have to agree with Alan's summary of the weather, because it's exactly the same down here in the Boyne Valley. It's gotten very dull today after quite a sunny week or week and a half or 2 weeks. But anyway, that's the way it goes. This is Ireland after all. That's what we expect. Auntie Joe Butler is in Colorado, and I am also very glad to see you, Joe. Hope you are well. Archaeoastronomy Database, who is Ty. Do not forget to follow Archaeoastronomy Database's wonderful YouTube channel. I shared his video examining the movement of the sun the other day. Fascinating stuff, I think you will agree, and plenty more interesting work to come there. Kathy Maydeo is in the house, having a windstorm here in Newcastle, Washington State. I'm always saying it, Pacific Northwest, same climate as Ireland. Sure, look, if you happen to have Irish roots and you end up living in somewhere around Seattle or Portland, Oregon, you probably don't feel, well, especially the more northerly parts, you probably don't feel that you've moved too far from home. Barb Jordan is in the house. Hello, Barb. Good evening to you. Susan Scott, hiking today, but I've got you all in my pocket. Beautiful day in Northwest Connecticut. Thank you, Susan. Hope you enjoy that beautiful day. Good afternoon to you from a cloudy but cheerful Boyne Valley. Mandy McCurl is in the house. Wet, windy, and very cold on the Isle of Mull. Oh, dear. Well, you can keep the rest of it. I mean, we have the cloudy bit, but and a bit of the wind, but you can keep the cold temperatures. I think it hit 15 Celsius here today, which is quite mild. Merit Braun Schmidt is in Switzerland. A very good evening to you, Merit. Thank you for joining us. Jules Cousins is in the house. Sláinte, Jules, you're very welcome to the live stream. Colleen M. Gudio is in Florida. Fantastic stuff. Hope the weather is beautiful in Florida. And thank you for joining us, Colleen. And of course, Colleen is the Irish word for girl. So there you go. Kathy Sue Sylvester is in southern Indiana in the USA. Kathy Sue, it's very nice to have you, to have your company this evening on Live Irish Myths. Indigo Friedlander, making my first trip to Ireland in June. So excited. Brilliant stuff. I wonder where you're heading to. But hope you get the usual big Irish fáilte, Céad Míle fáilte. 100,000 welcomes. Mariana Dunn, Banachty, Dear Tua, and Anthony from Virginia. Mariana, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Barbara Barney is in the house. Giagwich, Barbara. Trina Niark is here. Fáilte, Trina. And yes, very good to have you along. Hope you are keeping safe and well. Rosanna Marsh is saying good evening from Anne Fishhoik. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's South Africa. Wow, brilliant. We don't often get South African viewership, so this is a real reason to celebrate. I'd nearly crack open the wine just to celebrate. But maybe I'll hold that off till later on. Rosanna, you're very welcome. Daisy Peters is joining us from Rio in Brazil. Glad to be here. Hope it's not too hot in the southern hemisphere, Daisy, and that you are keeping well. Nick Eska Casterton is in the house. Good evening, Anthony and the wonderful Tua. Had a lovely day delivering the donations from my local gym to the charity collecting for the Ukraine. It's always humbling how generous people can be. Give you a good feeling. Brilliant stuff, Nick. And thank you for your charitable efforts. Brilliant. Delighted to see that. Brendan Byrne is in the house. Winter is back. Still snow drifts on the mountain tops. Really? Wow. In Wicklow. Didn't realise it had been that cold, but of course it's always colder up the mountains, isn't it? Robert Friend is in the house. Falcha, Robert, thank you for joining us. Anne McCallum is in the house. Hope everyone's keeping well. Greetings from Southwest Ontario. But the weather, sadly, is not worth mentioning. Hopefully it'll pick up soon, Anne. I mean, it's April. I mean, surely summer is bound to arrive any day now. Wayne Bird is in the house. Evening, Anthony. Hope everyone's well from Birmingham. Slippers and refreshments on hand. Well, my slippers are on my feet. Yes, indeed. Yeah. I was sitting drinking a glass of wine. I was sitting drinking wine the other day in my slippers, and I was just sitting there thinking, I should get some wine glasses. Anyway, Cyrene is in Seattle. Another viewer from Pacific Northwest, where the weather is very Irish, and it sounds like we're having exactly the same kind of day. Cyrene, very nice of you to join us. You're very welcome this afternoon. Stephen O'Hara is in Dublin tonight. Bit cloudy here as well. I wonder, are you partying tonight, Stephen? Excuse me. I hope you're enjoying your time in Ballyaclia. I cannot pronounce this name, but this person is saying hello from super hot Mexico City. Wow. I don't know if we've ever had a viewer from Mexico City. That's fantastic. One of the biggest, population-wise, one of the biggest cities in the world. Brilliant stuff. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to welcome you. Desiree Riley is in the house from Grand Junction, Colorado. We are happy that you are here, Desiree, as we always are. And you bring a smile to proceedings every time. Tom Byrne is in Celtic Park? Celtic Park? West Limerick. I don't know it, Tom. Please forgive me, but you're very, very welcome. And to all our friends in the Southwest. Karen Murphy Beglin saying, hi, everyone. Jiagwich Karen Falcha Kuji on live stream. Tom King is in the house. Hello there, Anthony Mighty Tua. A treat having you out at the Forge today. Good fun and great company. Glad you enjoyed. Still working away and ready for story time. Looking forward. Well, I tell you what, no rest for the wicked, Tom. And always a pleasure from my point of view. The hospitality of the Forge, excellent as always. And lovely to be able to spend some time there in the middle of the day today. Valerie Gallagher is in Rhode Island. Valerie, who was recently in Ireland. Valerie, it's a great pleasure to welcome you. Paula is saying, caught you live only up in Dublin. So not so interesting as some locations. What? Dublin is full of interesting stories. We were only talking about the Vikings for 4 episodes there. Of course, Dove Lynn, the Blackpool, and not forgetting Ballyaclia, the ford of the hurdles, connected with the Boyne Valley through the story of the Mata. Interesting stuff. Paula, thank you for joining us. Garroj O'Branagon, hey ho, Falcha, Garroj, Conasata tu Makara. Hope you are in fine fettle. Edward Curry is saying, Eddie NYC. Saying hello from the Big Apple, always a delight, because I was there, one of the few places in the States I can actually claim to have been to. Lucinda Matthews is in Central Virginia. Lucinda, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to Live Irish Myth. Sue Prenter, sorry for those who missed. Yeah, I bloody had to miss Professor Dan Bradley's lecture. Yes, I certainly would be more than willing and interested to extend the hand of welcome to Professor Bradley on a live stream. I think he would make a fascinating guest, and I'm really sorry that I missed his lecture the other day. It sounded fascinating. Catherine Hupp, from what you told me, Sue, from sunny Colorado. Good evening. Spread a bit of that sunshine around the place, Catherine. Send a little bit of across the ocean, especially to the Isle of Mull. I think Mandy's kind of missing the sun just there at the moment. And if it happens to cross the Boyne Valley on its way, we'll take that as well. Annette Peard is saying, Falcha, Annette, it's great to see you. Annette is up near the hill of Tara. What a place to live, huh? Bernie Courtney is in chilly Castlebar. Really looking forward to this evening's meet. I have a wee tipple to ward off the Reavogue days. Brilliant stuff. Spread it round. Oh, wait, you can't because you're in Castlebar and I'm in Drogheda. Damn. Maybe next time. Indeed. Hey, wait, you see. Oh, wait, you see what I got for my birthday recently. Make us all jealous. Woo! Yes, that's all I have consumed since my birthday. I know, said. And do you want to know what's even better? Not that I'm doing product advertising or anything. You know what? Want to know what's even better? I got 2 bottles of it. 2 of these. Plenty to keep me going for the next while anyway. See the way I keep it handy? Just in case, you know? That's either a good sign or the sign of a problem. But anyway, the drinks cabinet is actually out there. So who knows? Indy Riggs is in the house. Hello, Indy. Good evening to good afternoon to you. Edina Sparks is in sunny and warm New Mexico. Brilliant. I saw plenty of Sparks today, Edina, in Tom King's Forge. Catherine Hupp is laughing. Don't encourage me with the jokes. Stephen O'Hara says, you know me so well. Partying indeed. Brilliant stuff, Stephen. Great to hear it. Hope you have a great time. Erica Bow is in the house. Hello, Erica. Good afternoon to you. And great to see you. Hope you're well. Britt Griffin, the snow is starting to melt in northern Ontario. I saw a video on Facebook, and I don't know how long ago it was shot, but it was a guy in a car, and the window, you know, there was frosted, it was ice basically on the outside of the window. And he pressed the switch and the window went down and the ice sheet stayed there and he had to break it with his hand. I just thought, we don't get weather like that in Ireland. Touch wood. We don't want weather like that in Ireland. You can keep it over there in Northern Ontario. Britt, very good of you to join us. Helena Breen is in the house. Fáilte, Helena, welcome to Live Irish Myths. Brady Tussey is in Arizona. Good afternoon, Brady. Glad you could join us. Rory and Mark Guinan in the Faithful County. I don't know my counties too well. Which is the Faithful County, Mark? Please, I know how rude and ignorant of me not to know, but you're very, very welcome. Anne Sieben is saying, greetings from a train along the eastern seaboard of the US. What a treat to catch the show live. Brilliant stuff. I also had the pleasure of such a train ride from Princeton up to New York, Penn Station. Brilliant stuff. Kerem Gogas is in the house. Hello, Kerem. You're very welcome. Always a pleasure to see you in our live streams. Lots of people saying hello to each other, which is brilliant. Ashley says hi. Jigwich Ashley, welcome to Live Irish Myths. Robert M. Brown says hi, Anthony. Fáilte, Robert, you're very, very welcome. Sheila Gunn. So is that the second bottle? No, that's actually only the first bottle, Sheila. I know. I'm a bit of an amateur. Like, you know what I mean? But I will say one thing. I drink my whiskey the way whiskey is supposed to be consumed. No water, no ice. Just neat. That's how whiskey is done. You know? As they say in Ireland, if I wanted water, I'd have asked for water. If I want whiskey, I'll ask for whiskey. You know? What was the other? Yes. In other news, the founder of Dulux Paint Company has been found dead on the top of a mountain. A police spokesperson said he could have been doing with another coat. Sorry. Yes. Who Godarn agrees with me. Same here. Neat. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the only way to enjoy a whiskey. So you might have seen on the Facebook page and the Instagram, I spent some time today with Tom King in his forge. Just a reminder that you can get your Ongova creations on the Mythical Ireland website, such as the wonderful Triskel pendant, the wearable Triskel, and several other items, including the Swan Spiral pendant. I have one there, and the Mythical Ireland letter opener. Fantastic. I mean, if you have any amount of mail at all, you can't be without a decent letter opener. And Tom King makes the best letter openers of all. Anyway, also, if you'd like to support Mythical Ireland, please do consider becoming a patron. And that is the address there. It's www.patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. Currently, the patrons, as of yesterday, were treated to some photographs and information about another new drone discovery made over the weekend by my good self. I hope that the patrons enjoy that. If you want to know more about it, please consider becoming a patron and get lots of goodies and extras and stuff that other people don't see, and merchandise at a particular level. Anyway, I think we're all caught up with the comments. Tonight, I'm going to be reading from a book that is very well known here. If you wanted, so say if you knew nothing about Irish history, right? And you said to yourself, I want to learn Irish history, but I don't want to have to consume 12 or 20 or 50 volumes of reading. If you wanted, say, a potted history of Ireland, a summary of the history of the island from prehistory down to the modern era, you could do worse than to get yourself a copy of Jonathan Barden's wonderful A History of Ireland in 250 Episodes. I actually have 2 copies of this, but my daughter has commandeered one because she is very interested in history. Originally commissioned as a series of over 200 short radio programs, the texts have now been re-edited to provide a sweeping single narrative of Irish history from the end of the Ice Age to the peace settlement in Northern Ireland. Jonathan Barden covers all the obvious things: the invasions, battles, development of towns and cities, the Reformation, the Georgian era, the famine, rebellions and resistance, the difference of Ulster, partition, the 20th century. What makes his book so valuable, however, are the quirky subjects he chooses to illustrate how history really works. The great winter freeze of 1740 and the famine that followed, crime and duelling, an emigrant voyage, evictions. These episodes get behind the historical headlines to give a glimpse of past realities that might otherwise be lost to view. The author has retained the original episodic structure of the radio programs. The result is a marvellous mosaic of the Irish past, delivered with clarity and narrative skill. Tonight, I'm going to read 4 of these short chapters, which cover the period at which Ireland was just about to suffer, endure, experience the arrival of the Anglo-Normans, which of course opened an entirely new chapter of history, one that is at turns brutal, painful, tragic, and there isn't a huge amount of good to say about it, to be honest with you, but from our point of view anyway. Our previous episodes kind of lead into this, because remember that, when the Vikings had been pretty much routed, vanquished at the Battle of Clontarf, one might have thought, well, things will settle down in Ireland now. But of course, as we heard, politically, Ireland was very divided. Economically, it seemed to function perfectly well, but politically, it was a disaster area. It was very much ripe for conquest because of the lack of ability, as it were, for people to come together under one ruler. That ruler might have been the great Brian Boru. However, he had his skull cut in two with an axe of a fleeing Viking at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014 and did not survive. Had he survived, who knows? History could have turned out very differently. We did cover that. If you're just joining us and you've never seen an episode before, highly recommend that you go back to the previous 4 episodes dealing with the arrival of the Vikings. Wall Ainberg says, what do you know about the mysteries celebrated by the Druids in their sacred groves and clearing of the forest? Not something I can get into tonight. We did do episodes about the Druids that you might be interested in. Clearings of the forests are mentioned in a couple of the Dinshenachas tales. That's also been covered, but I can't tell you which episode. So what I'm basically saying is you'll have to watch all previous 175 episodes to find out. It's a good question, though. Excuse me. Adrian Beglin is in the house. Fáilte, Adrian, welcome. Tinkle Tink says, watch out for those axes. I think actually Brian Boru was in his tent praying for victory at the time and was probably kneeled down in prayer, didn't even see it coming. It was all over before he knew it. Oh, Nora Gaffney O'Connor is in the house. G.E.F. Golair. See, it was lovely. Double dip yesterday. It was so lovely. Bring back the sun, please. Yes, we've been asking the Coloradoans to send it across the ocean to us, and I hope they do that. Joe Butler says, wonderful drone discovery might be a gate. Yes, indeed. And of course, Joan is a patron and gets to see all this neat stuff. Alan Hoskin says, neat it is, no question about it. And he's talking about the whiskey. Absolutely. I mean, there's no debate, really, is there? No. Anyway, I hope that you enjoy yourselves. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. It's only 21 minutes past 8. I've only been prattling on for 21 minutes. So we are actually starting with episode 25 of to Ireland's history in 250 episodes, which is basically 1/10 of the way in, if you think about it. This chapter is called The Rape of Dervorgilla. Are you all sitting comfortably? I'd be more... Do you know what? I'd nearly pour myself a dram. You know? Helena Breen is loving the crack or the humour. Nobody commented on my Dulux joke. Was it not funny? Probably wasn't, in fairness. Most of my jokes aren't funny. They're dad jokes, after all. They're the sort of jokes that might entertain a 6-year-old. But a 60-year-old, harder work, you know. Nora Gaffney O'Connor says, please, Colorado, send some. Sharing is caring. Absolutely. Don't hog it all for yourselves. And the Floridians, Floridan, those people in Florida, you send it over as well. Anyway, this is episode 25 of this. It's episode 176 of Live Irish Myths. Excuse me. I will take a sip of water before we begin. It's only just starting to get dark here, by the way. Oh, Kathy Maydale has to leave us because our lunch is over. Oh. Well, all we got to do was say the hellos. But anyway, at least you got us to say hello. And I know that you'll watch back later on because the video is always available afterwards on YouTube and on Facebook. Kathy May, have a great day at work. Thank you for joining us. Naomi Serafina could do with another coat. Hilarious. Thank you. I had to ask for a reaction and I got one. One person in the world thinks the joke is funny. Katie McMahon says, your jokes are dubious at times. No. My jokes are dubious all the time. And Naomi is joining us from the aforementioned Portland, Oregon. Brilliant stuff, Naomi. Hope the weather is not too Irish over there. And you're keeping safe and well. For a century and a half after the Battle of Clontarf, the provincial kings of Ireland vied with one another and fought one another to become the High King of Ireland. The descendants of Brian Boru, the O'Briens, quickly lost power to Dermot McMurrough, King of Leinster. Dermot seized Dublin in 1052 and in time forced most of the kings of Ireland to acknowledge him as High King. In addition, he used Dublin's formidable fleet of longships to dominate the Irish Sea and become ruler of the Isle of Man and the Western Isles. There you go. I wonder, does that include Mandy McCurl? Does that include Mull? Fascinatingly, he's basically using the technology that had been brought by the Vikings to keep a check on the sea lanes, which is fascinating. Harold Godwinson spent the winter of 1051 to 52 in Ireland under Dermot's protection. And after Harold had been defeated and killed at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, his sons found refuge with this powerful Irish High King. When Dermot was killed in battle in 1072, he was described by an annalist as the, quote, King of Ireland with opposition, unquote. What does that even mean? It means that I suspect, I'll probably find out in the in the ensuing sentences exactly what it means. But I imagine what it means is there never really was a true High King of all Ireland, because there was always kings and tribes that didn't, bow to the High King. All succeeding High Kings winning control of most but never all of Ireland could be described as, quote, kings with opposition, unquote. Alan Hoskins is telling us that Hastings is his hometown. Fascinating stuff. There you go. There's a good link. Tarini Pendleton is in the house from Laguna Beach in California. There she is, sitting on her deck chair, sipping pina coladas, which is always the image I have. Is just think every time she's on the beach watching Live Irish Myths. How many people in Ireland would get that pleasure? And how many weeks of the year would you be able to do it? Dermot's replacement was a grandson of Brian Boru, Turlough O'Brien. His son, Murtagh O'Brien, succeeded him in 1086 and came very close to being the ruler of all Ireland. The most tenacious opposition always seemed to come from, go on, guess. Always seemed to come from Ulster. And for a time, an Ineal ruler, Donald McLaughlin, became High King. Not only did Irish kings wage war against one another in contest for the High Kingship, but within each dynasty, there were constant succession disputes. This was almost inevitable when, by Irish law, all sons and grandsons had a claim on the throne when a king died. In these ruthless struggles, defeated claimants were frequently ritually blinded or otherwise maimed. We have mentioned that in recent live streams. What a horrible thing for one human being to inflict upon another. But that is the gory past. Lest anybody ever tell you, oh, I'd love to go back to medieval Ireland. What a romantic era it must have been, full of heroes and kings of great deed and druids and warriors and beautiful princesses and all that stuff and lovely horses. Don't mention Father Ted, my lovely horse. But in fact, I think if you went back there, you'd probably be pretty horrified by an awful lot of what occurred in those far off days. In 1151, the annals record a great battle at Moyne Moor. That just literally means, I think, the big bog in North Cork, and claimed that 7,000 Munster men were killed. This marked the rise of Turlough O'Connor, King of Connacht, who defeated the O'Briens and divided Munster in two, into Thomond, North Munster, and Desmond, South Munster. Which is fascinating because that sparks a debate about the whole thing about 5 provinces in relation to Ishnach, Peter Woods is in the house and reminds us that the sun is always shining in Louth, even when it's not. Peter, you're very welcome. Good afternoon to you. I hope you're well. Sure, he's only up the road from me. He could nearly hear me. Like, I could nearly squawk out the window at him and he'd hear me. It might be possible to pass over this dreary, seemingly interminable warfare, but for the fact that it was to lead to the coming of the Normans to Ireland. That story begins with a deadly conflict between Tiernan O'Rourke, the one-eyed king of Breffni, and Dermot McMurrough, king of Leinster. And that's fascinating, as you will know from our many mentions on Live Irish Myths over the past 2 years, of the fact that a king usually was not allowed, was forbidden to rule once he had a blemish of any sort, because that blemish could be seen to, as it were, infect or to affect the health of the kingdom at large, and the land and the growth of crops and that sort of thing. Very unusual for a king to remain in place, given that he had only one eye. There you go. Aye. Terrible. Their quarrel was principally over the riss. I'll start that sentence again. Their quarrel was principally over the rich pastures of the kingdom of Meath, but it was further embittered by the love between Dermot and Tiernan's wife, Dervorgilla. Now, this thing about rich pastures in Meath, Meath is like literally a few hundred meters that way. I'm in Louth, but Meath, most of the Boyne River's course is in County Meath, and it is a fact that the Meath land is the best farming land in Ireland and has been. It should be no surprise to us that the largest of all the passage tombs built in the Neolithic were built by the banks of the Boyne in Meath. And I think that a big part of the fact that they were so humongous and ostentatious, they were gargantuan, was the fact that the land provided the community with the surplus to enable them to engage in monumental architecture and monument construction. One night in 1152, hooves thundered away from the Breffni capital of Dromahair as Dermot, that's in the modern day county of Leitrim, if I'm not mistaken. Breffni would be a kingdom covering parts of Leitrim and modern day County Cavan. One night in 1152, hooves thundered away from the Breffni capital of Dromahair as Dermot carried off Dervorgilla together with a great prey of cattle. Because if you're going to do a raid, you might as well grab some cattle because, you know, you might get hungry. And you might want to make yourself a burger. Or a steak. Or a bit of mincemeat. This humiliation burned in Tiernan's memory and filled his heart with vengeful hatred to his dying day. The events were recorded by our good friend, who we did an episode on a while back, Gerald of Wales, otherwise known as Giraldus Cambrensis, a few years later. And this is the following couple of paragraphs are from Cambrensis. Barbara Murphy snuck in late to my sorrow. Barbara Murphy, sit at the front of the class, pay full attention throughout the episode, and I will want you to write a 500-word summary of the episode when we're done. Joke. But your office care, I wasn't supposed to highlight that comment, but anyway, not to worry. Barbara, I'm only joking. You're very welcome to the live stream. And I have a special place in my heart for anybody called Murphy. Here's the shocker, right? Dermot McMurrough, about whom we're going to read quite a lot this evening. McMurrough is another variant of the surname Murphy. I think what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is that it was a Murphy who sold out Ireland. But not related to you or me, Barbara, obviously, because we wouldn't do anything like that. Madison Morell is also late. That's okay. The wizard is sometimes late, sometimes early, but means arrives when they are supposed to. You can also sit at the front and just pay double attention now. And pour me a whiskey there, would you? Jane Wynn is also late. Hope you didn't notice. Well, if you're going to sneak in late and you don't want me to notice, the thing is, don't put a comment saying, I'm late, I hope you don't notice, because I'm going to make an example. No, I'm only joking. You're very welcome, Jane, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Judy McQueen says, greetings, Giagwich. Judy, she doesn't say she's late, so, you know, she doesn't. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter. Hate when work gets in my way. That is a good excuse. There are only two excuses for missing Live Irish Myths. One is work, and the other is death. All right? And given that the latter is something we don't want to even contemplate, work is a good excuse. That's perfectly okay. Elaine, you're very welcome, but sit at the front and pay attention. Money messing. So this is a quote from Giraldus Cambrensis. On an occasion when O'Rourke had gone off on an expedition to far distant parts, his wife, whom he had left on an island, very charming of him, was abducted by the aforesaid Dermot, who had long been burning with love for her and took advantage of her husband's absence. Today, we would call that kidnapping. No doubt she was abducted because she wanted to be, and, quote, since, quote, woman is always a fickle and inconstant creature, unquote. Slight misogyny in these some of these tales, ladies. I do apologize. She herself arranged that she should become the kidnapper's prize. Almost all the world's most notable catastrophes have been caused by women. This is Giraldus again writing. Forgive, this is not me stating this, ladies and gentlemen. Just in case somebody has just joined us and thinks it's me that's saying this. This is Giraldus Cambrensis, that 12th century Norman church propagandist. Almost all the world's most notable catastrophes have been caused by women. Witness Mark Antony and Troy. King O'Rourke was stirred to extreme anger on 2 counts. of which, however, the disgrace rather than the loss of his wife grieved him more deeply. Typical. And he vented all the venom of his fury with a view to revenge. Naomi is making a very interesting point, and that is that death is no excuse to miss live Irish myths. We're one a spirit. We're one a spirit. One could show up in person. Correct. And people often say they're there in spirit anyway. Michael Pike is in the house. Hello, Michael. Very good of you to join us. Please note that the episode started half an hour ago. I'm only joking. I think that joke's going to get old, that giving out to people being late. So we'll say nothing. How very dare you, says Nora Gaffney O'Connor. I told you, I'm not saying that. Irish technical thinkers in the house. Marcus, you're very welcome to our episode. And so thus ends the Cambrensis quote. O'Rourke had to wait 14 years for his revenge, for Dermot had hitched his fortunes to the rising star of Murtagh MacLachlan. In 1166, Michael Pike says, what? I would say I'm in funny humour. Sorry, that's Michael's comment there. I would say I'm in funny humour. A lot of people would say, you're not funny. I think I'm funny, but I am my target audience, you know. In 1166, Murtagh captured and blinded the Uli king, that's the Ulster king, Yochi Mac Donlevy, in defiance of solemn guarantees given by the Archbishop of Armagh. Typical church always interfering in secular affairs. Michael, we were talking earlier before you came on about my wonderful birthday present, which I received recently. I just wanted your vote on this. Whiskey, neat or not? Let's see what Michael thinks. The revulsion following this act of treachery caused Murtagh's support to drop away, and shortly afterwards, this high king was killed in a skirmish. The Norman-French poem, The Song of Dermot and the Earl, continues the story. Now, I won't be singing, ladies and gentlemen, I will just merely be reciting. Mavanway, missed my birthday. Yeah, shocking that I, didn't get a card from you. It was in March. It was less than 2 weeks ago. There you go. O'Rourke, much grieving, to Connacht went in all haste. To the King of Connacht he relates all. Very earnestly he besought him. Obviously, this is an English translation of a French poem. To make ready for him some of his household and of his men, so that he could avenge his shame. And that's the end of the poem. Rory O'Connor of Connacht, now rapidly establishing his claim to the high kingship, gave his blessing to Tiernan's punitive expedition. The men of Breffni, supported by the Dublin Norse and the King of Meath, the Norse were still living in Dublin, even though they had been defeated at the Battle of Clontarf. There was still enough of them hanging around. The men of Breffni, supported by the Dublin Norse and the King of Meath, swept into Leinster and devastated McMurrough's kingdom. I'm in two minds as to whether to pronounce it McMurrough or McMurrough, because I would be used to the I presume it's an anglicization of it, McMurrough, but I will say McMurrough, I think, in preference. Dermot had no choice but to flee from Ireland. Rory O'Connor then made a circuit of Ireland and won the submission of all the kings of the island. At last, it seemed that one man had become the High King of Ireland without opposition. Rory O'Connor, however, had reckoned without Dermot and his newfound friends. So this is fascinating. That's the end of that little chapter, and we're going to read a few more. This is fascinating because just when it seemed there was unity, at last, all of the kingdoms united under one ruler. Things were about to take a bit of a turn. Without spoiling it, I will read on. Michael Pike, yes, don't ruin it with Ishka. Absolutely. 100% right, Michael. If I wanted water, I'd ask for water. Mavanway, What's the date? And I'll put it in my diary for the next time. There's no need to apologise. Absolutely not. I didn't share it anyway, so I wasn't expecting 23rd of March. Interestingly, stuck right between. I'm kind of an equinox baby, a few days after equinox. Stuck right at that time when the sun, viewed from Millmount, sets into the Hill of Slane, which is fascinating. Anyway, there you go. This one is called At Baginbun, Ireland Was Lost and Won. Early in the 10th century, Charles the Simple, King of France, nice title, sobriquet. That is a French word for nickname, isn't it? Sobriquet. It certainly sounds French. Early in the 10th century, Charles the Simple, King of France, desperate to end the ravaging of his dominions by the Northmen, made an agreement to give Rolf is it Ganger? Ganger, or is it Ganger? Ganger? I don't know how to pronounce that. Rolf the Ganger, we'll call him for now, right? Because it sounds like a kind of an Irish nickname. A province of northern France in return for peace. These Vikings settled contentedly, married French girls, and learned to speak their language. Oh, je t'adore, Mumselle. Yes, never mind. L'escargot. Soon this province of Normandy became a powerful state, and in 1066, led by their Duke William, the Normans defeated Harold of England at Alan Hoskin's hometown of Hastings. The conquest of England was ruthlessly completed within a few years, and Norman barons were beginning to penetrate into South Wales and southern Scotland. Other Normans carved out a kingdom for themselves in southern Italy and Sicily, while the descendants of William the Conqueror extended their dominions in other parts of France. The genius of the Normans for organisation and effective government, together with their skill in warfare, made them feared and respected far and wide. O King of Heaven, awful is the deed done in Ireland today. The Calends of August, that is, the expulsion overseas by the men of Ireland of Dermot, son of Domhnach McMurrough, King of Leinster and the Northmen. Alas, alas, what shall I do? So claimed the scribe in the Book of Leinster when Dermot, his wife and daughter, and a small group of followers fled to England on the 1st of August 1166. Dermot, however, had plans to recover his kingdom. He called on his friend Robert Fitzharding, the Reeve of Bristol. Fitzharding advised him to seek out his king, Henry II, by now the most powerful monarch in Western Europe. Well, yes, easy to see why, because they got better names than the French. Charles the Simple just doesn't sound very inspiring, does it? Dermot travelled to Aquitaine, and, according to the Song of Dermot and the Earl, addressed Henry as follows: Hear, noble king, whence I was born, of what country. By the way, if you've seen the graphic for today's episode, that is a representation of Dermot McMurrough's meeting with Henry II. Hear, noble king, whence I was born, of what country. Of Ireland I was born a lord, in Ireland acknowledged king. But wrongfully my own people have cast me out of my kingdom. To you I come to make plaint, good sire, in the presence of the barons of your empire. See, it rhymes. Never mind. Your liege man I shall become henceforth all the days of my life. Be careful what you wish for and what you pledge, on condition that you be my helper, so that I do not lose at all. Henry listened sympathetically, for Dermot had championed his claim to the English throne in the past, and, according to Gerald of Wales, he granted him letters patent in the following terms: Henry, King of England, Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine, and Count of Anjou, gives his greetings to all his faithful subjects. When you receive this present letter, be advised that we have admitted to our most intimate grace and favour Dermot, Prince of Leinster. Wherefore, if any person from within our wide dominions wishes to help in restoring him, as having done us fealty and homage, let him know that he has our goodwill and permission to do this. Yes, indeed. Basically, our pal Dermot, being pissed off at losing his kingdom in Ireland, went over the sea to lick the English king's ass. Sorry for putting it in gross terms, but I mean, let's just call it as it is, you know. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, says Brendan Byrne. Yes, indeed. Apparently, Sue thinks this is very entertaining. Brilliant. At no extra cost. And no whiskey consumed yet. The evening is early, in fairness. Glad you're enjoying it. I really, really enjoy how this is. I enjoy reading this. It's very. I think it's very well put together. And again, a synopsis of everything that happened. On a clear day, Norman barons in southwest Wales could see the mountains of Wexford and Wicklow across the sea, seeming to beckon them on to further conquest. Now, they could go by invitation and eagerly, now they could go by invitation. And it's amazing how the stress can change the whole meaning of a sentence, for which I apologise. Now they could go by invitation, and eagerly they pledged their support to Dermot in return for promises of land. To the greatest of them, Richard Fitzgilbert de Clare. What a name! I mean, wouldn't you just call yourself Rich or Dick or something, you know? Richard Fitzgilbert de Clare. Of course, he did get a nickname, which we will encounter later in the sentence. I'll say it again. To the greatest of them, Richard Fitzgilbert de Clare, Lord of Strigwell, better known as Strongbow. Now, I like that. You know, Strongbow. It gives it portrays the notion of strength and warriorship. You know, McMurrough pledged the hand of his daughter Aoife in marriage, and the kingdom of Leinster when Dermot himself died. So basically, Dermot is pretty much selling out, isn't he? Really, you know. Liam Anderson makes a point, and I think there are lots of historians who agree that I think whether Dermot extended the hand of invitation or not, those Norman lords were indeed espying Ireland from across the sea and probably making plans. However, because of what did actually transpire, we cannot absolve Dermot of blame, whether they were going to or not, you know. Fergal Canton, I do declare Strongbow the winner. Brilliant. Yes. In August 1167, Dermot slipped back to Leinster with a small force of Flemings under Richard Fitz-Godebert of Ross, or HOS. Slipped back. I wonder, did he have a fake beard or something, a clip-on beard, you know? Aren't you going to haggle? Never mind. Monty Python reference. Naturally, the High King, Rory O'Connor, and Tiernan O'Rourke of Breffni made an appearance, but they allowed themselves to bought off. It doesn't say to be bought off. Ooh, I appear to have spotted a proofing error in the book. But they allowed themselves to bought off. I presume that's supposed to be B. Oh, look, the sub-editor in me, the proofreader, can't help but actually adding the word B. Dermot paid Tiernan 100 ounces of gold as the honour price for the abduction of Dervorgilla 15 years before. And to Rory, he gave 7 hostages. Very pleasant affair. Dermot passed an anxious year in 1168 without any sign of Norman help. Not until May 1169 did a substantial contingent arrive, some 300 fighting men, packed into 3 ships, setting out from Milford Haven and led by Robert Fitzstephen, Hervey de I don't know how to pronounce that because I presume it's a French pronunciation, du Montmorency and Maurice de Prendergast. Landing at Bannow Bay, they advanced on the Viking town of Wexford and forced its submission. Such a modest force was not enough to enable Dermot to recover his kingdom. Dermot had to contend with an attack from the neighbouring kingdom of Ossory, and when the High King and the King of Breffni returned, Dermot had no choice but to hand over his son Conor as a hostage. And of course, the reason for the exchange of family members as hostages was kind of a guarantee that if you did anything against the king, he would just murder or maim your son. So you basically, it was a way of ensuring a sort of a stalemate or a standoff. At last, early in standoff might not be the right word there, but you get the meaning, I hope. At last, early in May 1170, reinforcements commanded by Raymond Le Gros Fitzgerald arrived in a creek 8 miles to the east of Waterford city. This place is known as Bag in Bun, named after the two ships which carried over the invaders, La Bague and La Bonne, and immortalised in the rhyme, "At the creek of Bag in Bun, Ireland was lost and won." A momentous new era in the history of the island had begun. That's the end of that second chapter. We will read more. I'm just going to turn off my heater because it's quite warm here. Hope you're all nice, warm, toasty, comfortable, and suitably drammed up wherever you happen to be. Whether you're in South Africa or Switzerland or Northern Ontario or Florida or the Isle of Mull. Carmel O'Dwyer informs us that there's a great exhibition in the National Gallery at the moment on an expansion on the Strongbow and Aoife painting. Brilliant stuff, Carmel. Thank you for letting us know about that. And Nora Gaffney O'Connor, yes, a fabulous painting in the National Gallery, Ireland, of this union. It's a huge painting and depicts all the Irish heroes lying dead on the ground, depicting the death of Ireland. Naomi, I'm not sure that I should highlight your comment, but yes. There are a lot of people who would definitely not agree. Carmel O'Dwyer wants to know the name of the book, which I did announce earlier on. And you obviously weren't paying attention. I'm only joking. It's a wonderful A History of Ireland in 250 episodes by Jonathan Barden. Originally a series, a mini-series on radio, and wonderfully collated into this book, which is a potted history of Ireland, which is fabulous. As I said, if, like me, you left school not knowing as much about Irish history as you really wanted to or should have, a good place to start. This chapter is called Waterford and Dublin, a tale of two sieges. The foreigners, how are we doing for time? 5 to 9, we're flying. The foreigners who came to help Dermot McMurrough recover his kingdom of Leinster were as much Welsh as they were Norman and Flemish. At the core was a tightly knit family group, all descended from a remarkable Welsh princess, Nesta, daughter of Rhys ap Tudor. Movanwe might help us with that. Or HYS. Separate word AP. Separate word TEWDWR. Who had children by Stephen, Constable of Cardigan, father of Robert Fitzstephen. King Henry I of England, grandfather of Mealer Fitzhenry. Gerald of Windsor, to whom she was married. And she had children by at least one other man. Even if Gerald was not actually their father or grandfather, most were happy to be named Fitzgerald and to be described as the Geraldines or the Geraldines. The bard of bad jokes. Well, I'll take that, Desiree. You know what? That's probably not too inaccurate, in fairness, Brendan Byrne is saying, unplug the heater. It's cheaper to drink whiskey to stay warm. You're probably not wrong. Yes, you said it right. Just throw in a bit of breath into the ore in Reese. What did I say? Rhys ap Tudor. I'm terribly sorry. And ap is Welsh for son of. That makes sense. Like Mac in Irish. Sean Greening tells us he's been binging on old episodes, but this is his first live show. Brilliant stuff, Sean. You're very welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Hope that the humour and the jokes aren't putting you off too much. Brilliant. Thank you, Mavanwe. Wow, I'm getting lessons in Welsh pronunciation. I'm not doing too bad, apparently. I'm not going to be thrown out anytime soon. Raymond Le Gros. Is it Gros or is that French again? Le Gros. Gros. And his men ensconced themselves in the old rath at Baginbun, and soon found themselves besieged by a mixed force of Norse from Waterford and Irish from the kingdom of Daces, which is the Dacia, outnumbered 10-1. Their situation was desperate, as Gerald of Wales, himself also a Geraldine, informs us. And this is a quote from our good friend, our good acquaintance, Geraldus Cambrensis. Raymond with his men, conspicuous for their gallantry, though few in number, went out to meet them and engage them in a most unequal contest. But because such a small force, though an excellent one, could not withstand such large numbers on level ground, they turned back to their camp. In their haste to enter it, they allowed the enemy who were pursuing them from behind inside the doors. When Raymond saw that his men were in the direst straits, he turned bravely to face the enemy, and in the very doorway transfixed with his sword the first to enter. Charming. Welcome to my house. While I run you through. Yes, indeed. Mavanwe has the book. Brilliant stuff. Yes. Widely available in both hardback and softback. So, hopefully you can dig that out. The defenders then drove out from the fort a herd of cattle, and in the ensuing stampede, the attackers were scattered and suffered fearful slaughter. Soon after, according to the song of Dermot and the Earl, followed an atrocity. Of the Irish there were taken quite as many as 70, but the noble knights had them beheaded. To a wench they gave an axe of tempered steel, and she beheaded them all, and threw their bodies over the cliff, because she had that day lost her lover in the combat. Insert comment here. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Alice of Abergavenny was her name, who served the Irish thus. Fierce woman not to be messed with. Meanwhile, Strongbow was on his way. Gerald of Wales continues. Having made the necessary preparations for such an important venture, Earl Richard, Strongbow, passed through the coastal regions of South Wales on his way to St. David's, and collected together the pick of the fighting men in those parts. Excuse me. When everything needful for a naval expedition on such a scale had been procured and made ready, he embarked at Milford Haven. A following wind filled his sails, and he put in at Waterford with 200 knights and about 1,000 others on St. Bartholomew's Eve. On the following day, when rumour had spread of this event, Raymond went to meet the Earl with 40 knights. They joined forces to carry forward to the assault of the city those battle standards which were already menacing its walls. They were twice vigorously repulsed by the citizens. Then Raymond noticed a small building which hung down from the town wall on the outside by a beam. He quickly sent in armed men to cut down the aforesaid beam. The building immediately collapsed, and with it a considerable part of the wall. The invaders eagerly effected an entry, rushed into the city, and won a most bloody victory, large numbers of the citizens being slaughtered in the streets. Wow. Mavanwe tells us that you've got to watch out for those Abergavenny girls. I'll do that. I'll take note of that advice. Desiree is thinking of nicknames for the members of the Tua. Yes, indeed. I have lots of nicknames. Some people call me various things. But anyway, you don't want to know, neither do I. What you think of me, and this is not aimed at you, Desiree. A good friend of mine says, in relation to people who want to mock you and to give out about you, it's like, what you think of me is none of my business. At the moment of victory, Dermot McMurrough arrived, and after the rulers of Waterford, both called Citric, there's that name again, were executed in Reginald's Tower, his daughter Aoife was married to Strongbow amidst the ruins of the city. The next objective was Dublin. Here the High King, Rory O'Connor, had assembled a formidable army outside the walls at the urgent request of Earl Hasculf, the city's ruler. Hasculf, that's undoubtedly a Norse name, guarded the approaches along the coast at Bray and the Scalp, while from the plain of Clondalkin, Rory kept watch over Schlicolan, the road on the western side of the Wicklow Mountains. Dermot knew his own kingdom, however, and and brought his allies across the thickly wooded plateau from Glen Macnace to Sallygap, and from there over the flank of Kipure Mountain to Rathfarnham. Sneaky. Brought them in over the mountains. Pardon me while I take a sip of water, of course. Sylvia Sanchez is in the house. Hello, Sylvia. You're very welcome. Seeing the impressive array of mailed horsemen and archers emerge from the woods, Hasculf sent out Lawrence O'Toole, the Archbishop of Dublin, to seek terms. The Norman adventurers had come too far to parley now. With Milo de Cogan and Raymond Le Gros in the van, Strongbow's men made a furious assault on the walls, overran the city, and butchered many citizens. Hasculf was fortunate to make his escape by ship, not like his predecessors in the Battle of Clontarf. So swift had been the Norman triumph that Rory could do nothing for Dublin. The High King's sole response was to put 3 hostages to death, one of them a son of Dermot McMurrough. Strongbow was near to his objective of creating a dominion for himself in Ireland, and this was a matter of growing concern for his liege lord, Henry II. And thus ends that short chapter, the third of 4 that we are reading this evening. So this one shall be the last. Hope you're enjoying it as I am. It is a little bit complex, and I need to I need to learn it better. I need to be able to recite this, as a matter of course. But it reminded me of, I can't remember which tribe the great warrior Tecumseh belonged to. I dare not say, because if I say and I get it wrong, Tecumseh, was he? Anyway, he fought with the English, thinking that things would work out all right, and they didn't. Dermot was perhaps the first to learn how treacherous the English could be in these affairs. But anyway, he thought he could bring over some of the lads from abroad and promise hands in marriage and promise a bit of land and everything would be grand. Well, I think they had bigger designs than that. Anyway, this is called Henry II Comes to Ireland. Strongbow had seized Waterford and Dublin, and Dermot McMurrough had been restored to his kingdom of Leinster. But neither Hasculf, Earl of Dublin, nor Rory O'Connor, High King of Ireland, were prepared to accept this new state of affairs. During the winter of 1170 to 71, the newcomers repaired Dublin's city defences and built a moat castle surrounded by a deep ditch, which is, by the way, a habit that the Normans had in many places. Shawnee, thank you very much, Fergal and Ty and Anne and Jane. Thank you all indeed. Shawnee, yes, indeed. I knew, yeah, I was going to say, was he Lakota? And I knew I was wrong when I was saying it. Then, in the spring of 1171, the whole Norman enterprise was threatened with disaster. Hearing that Dermot was dying in Ferns, Strongbow sped southwards to claim the kingdom pledged to him, only to find that the Leinster men, rallying to Murtagh McMurrough, had risen in revolt against their new overlords. Told you it was complex, didn't I? Earl Hasculf now returned with 60 longships filled with warriors from the Northern Isles, led by John the Woad, the famous berserker fighter. At the mouth of the Liffey, the Northmen leaped from their vessels to advance in phalanx on the city walls. They were, in the words of Gerald of Wales, warlike figures, clad in mail in every part of their body after the Danish manner. Some wore long coats of mail, others iron plates skillfully knitted together, and they had round red shields protected by iron round the edge. These men, whose iron will matched their armour, drew up their ranks and made an attack on the walls at the eastern gate. At the first onset, a knight's hip bone, protected though it was by an iron cuirass, Cuirass, cuirass. Be careful, Anthony. Make sure you get the pronunciation right. Yes, yes, indeed. So just bear with me for a moment, because there's a word I'm not familiar with.
Cuirass.
Cuirass. I was close. Yes. Let's hear that again.
Cuirass. Cuirass.
Yes, very excellently pronounced. I take it. I'll start that sentence again, and we'll ignore the foregoing. At the first onset, a knight's hip bone, protected though it was by an iron
cuirass,
was cut away with one blow of a Viking battle axe. Milo de Cogan, appointed governor of Dublin by Strongbow, was forced to retreat behind the wall. His brother Richard and his men, however, made an unobserved sortie through the southern gate and rounded on the attacker's rear. Yeah. Office care. Peter is saying, not difficult that. The Northmen now faced a new enemy, mounted knights, protected by chain mail from head to toe, carrying kite-shaped leather shields, secure on high-fronted saddles, and with their feet firmly placed in stirrups, were able to charge the foe directly with long lances. In support were Welsh longbowmen and Flemish foot soldiers with crossbows shooting mail-piercing arrows. Wow. Sounds a bit rough and tumble, doesn't it? Liam Anderson, I think you're right. So after driving the Vikings out in the battle, they didn't actually drive them out because they still continue to live in Dublin. But yes, I get the flavour of what you're saying, Liam Anderson. So after driving the Vikings out in the Battle of Clontarf, the Irish had to ask the Vikings back to fight the Normans. Am I on the right track? Yes. And the Normans were originally from Scandinavia, the Northmen. Oh, one moment, please, ladies and gentlemen. I have to allow the dog, Saskia, needs to go. And it was quite an urgent requirement to go out based on the way she was dancing at the door. She was doing a little dance, like, oh, I'm busting, please let me out. Yes. Now, where was I? Where was I? Yes, mail-piercing arrows. The Norse were put to flight. Yes, I was talking about the fact that the Normans were Northmen who had settled in that part of France having originally come from Scandinavia. It's a totally mad story. The Norse were put to flight. John the Woad was slain by Walter de Riddlesford, and Hasculf was dragged back from the shore. And this is another quote from Gerald. His life was spared with a view to ransom, and he was in the court in Milo's presence, when in everyone's hearing he made the following angry assertion, quote, "This is only our first attempt, but if only I am spared, this will be followed by other expeditions on a far larger scale, and having a different outcome from this one," unquote. When they heard him say this, he was immediately beheaded on Milo's orders, and these arrogant words cost him that life which he had been mercifully granted only a short while before. Speak the truth and lose your head. Next, the Normans had to face a great Gaelic host led by Rory O'Connor, with his own men of Connacht, O'Rourke of Breffni, O'Carroll from Ulster, and Mythical McMurrough from his Leinster kinsmen. With no knowledge of siege engines, the High King counted on starvation to bring the invaders to submission. And with the help of 30 longships from Man and the Isles, he very nearly succeeded. A daring stroke was needed to extricate the garrison from its desperate position. Shortly after noon, on an early September day in 1171, picked fighting men burst out of Dublin. The van of 20 knights, led by Raymond le Gros, followed by Milo de Cogan's company of 30 knights, with Strongbow in the rear, commanding 40 knights. Crossing Dovegall's bridge and taking a circular route over the Tolka, they fell on the Irish camp so suddenly that Rory, bathing in the river at Castleknock, barely escaped with his life and his parts. Never mind, a bit of juvenile humour on my part. Hundreds of the Irish were slain, and the foreigners had now had secure possession of Dublin. Sounds a tiny little bit like that scene in Lord of the Rings at the Battle of Helm's Deep when Theoden, the king, tells Aragorn, "Why don't we ride out, into what looked like certain slaughter, and they came down a bridge as well. Fascinating stuff." Henry II, the most powerful monarch in Western Europe, ruler of England, Normandy, Brittany, Anjou, Aquitaine, and much of Wales, viewed Strongbow's victories with deep misgiving. The defeat of the High King presented him with a spectre, an independent Norman state which could threaten his empire from the west. Henry prepared a great expedition for Ireland, though the cares of his vast dominions lay heavy on his shoulders. God help him. See the sympathy there? None. There was another reason for removing himself from his usual sphere of activity. He was deeply implicated in the murder of Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, and cardinal legates had arrived in Normandy to put embarrassing questions to the king concerning the atrocity. On St. Luke's Day, 18th of October 1171, 400 ships entered Waterford Haven, and King Henry's progress from there to Dublin was one of the finest triumphs of his long reign. So great was the royal retinue and baggage that camp had to be made outside of the city walls at the Thingmote, a 40-foot high man-made hill where the Vikings held their assemblies. On this spot, a great hall was built of stripped willow rods. Live TV, can't beat it. Here Henry held court and received the submission of a queue of Irish kings, acknowledging his new title as Lord of Ireland. There you go. Who's Rita? Somebody's saying hello to Rita. Rita. Hello, Rita. Fáilte. We'll watch the video in the morning since it's 3 a.m. here. Well, Hello again from Siberia. Hello, Rita. Hope you are not too cold. And a very good early Tuesday morning to you. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy watching back over the episode. And thank you indeed for the Cyrillic translation. Yeah, it's a fascinating and kind of a tragic period of history that really, I think the big problem wasn't it that there wasn't this unity, that there was so much division and things were so splintered. And this was, of course, a circumstance that didn't just suddenly arise in the 12th century. We've seen from previous episodes that at any given time in the early medieval period, there were up to 150 individual kingdoms and kingships. It's very difficult to maintain any sort of unity in that situation. And they do say, don't they, that one of the best ways to conquer is to divide and conquer. And if a people are already divided, then that makes that part of it much easier. Um, Not much mythology in what we've been reading. A lot of that we're kind of, into that period of history, which would be sort of reliably or unreliably recorded. Um, we've seen from previous episodes what certain experts have said about Gerald of Wales. And they do say, of course, as we've mentioned many, many, many times, that history is written by the victor. And perhaps if there was more mythology, we might get actually a better sense of what took place. But it was a total disaster from every point of view for Ireland and, of course, for its history. But it is in the past. There is nothing we can do to change it now. And the other thing is, there's no point holding on to hatred. When I announced this episode earlier on today, some of the comments on social media were very telling, and I see them in relation to anything to do with Ireland's colonial history. It's like there are people in Ireland today, and not just in Ireland, in other parts, but I'm talking about people in Ireland because this is where I live. And it's like they're holding on to anger about things that happened not just yesterday or 10 years ago or 100 years ago, but, several hundred years ago, sometimes longer. And I don't sort of get that. I really don't get it. It's like we've made our peace now. We have the Good Friday Agreement. We've done all the diplomacy. We try as much as possible to fit into both the European Union, and of course, we know that we have very strong trading links with our friends in Britain across the water. It just seems there's a certain, I think they're a minority, but they can be a very vocal minority, a minority of people for whom nationalism is a reason to be angry. It's like holding on to something. I see sometimes, for instance, quotes in relation to modern politicians, calling them free staters. I mean, that's politics that's as old as the hills. I just don't get it myself. But anyway, it is what it is, and lots of people beating drums about. United Ireland and 32 county republic and all the rest. I think in some cases, not all, but in some cases, I don't think these people have followed through the logic of their arguments as to exactly how that might come about, and the pros and cons of it. Not saying that I, of course, have certain views on this myself, personal views on Ireland and its history, and on the Republic, and on the six counties, and all of the rest, which won't be discussed in depth tonight. But one thing that I certainly do not try to do is to hold on to anger for past events. What's the point? If we hold on to anger, all we're going to do is cause bitterness in the present over events that have been in the past. We cannot do anything to change them. It is a sad and in many ways a tragic episode in Irish history. It is what it is. We can't undo it. What we can do right now, today, is to be the best people that we can be, put the best foot forward, and to basically embrace our fellow humans and try and get on together. Because you see what happens when nations get ideas about borders and territory and nationalities. They go to war, and nobody ever wins in those situations. Anyway, there you go. That's all I have to say about that. I do not want to say any more because I could go on and on and on. Indy Riggs agrees. Anger is such a destructive emotion. Yes, indeed. And as I say, just so many people who the ones who comment on, for instance, the famine. It's very divisive. And people say, it was a genocide, it was a genocide. And all the scholars say, it wasn't a genocide. Yes, there were lots of aspects of it that could have been, lots of it. But, the King of England at the time actually tried to repeal the Corn Laws, which was, he was going against all the merchants at the time. And the government fell apart, and they tried to get another government together, and they couldn't, and see, he had to come back to power. It's a very deep and complex story, and calling it a genocide does a disservice to the people who've actually really suffered from a genocide. But anyway, I went on far too long there. We were in great form until I started, so I'll shut up right now. Yes, Sue, I was thinking of Ukraine, actually, just as I said that. I hope that if you are in on the far side of the Atlantic, that you have a great day. I hope if you're on this side of the Atlantic, you have a good night. And I hope if you're further east, that you have a good night's sleep and a great morning. And I'm glad you all enjoyed tonight. Just something completely different, because I was thinking last week, I think we had done enough about the Vikings for now, 4 episodes. So we'll hopefully return to more mythological matters next week. Thanks, Tom King. Tom is still working in the forge at this hour of the night. Talk about dedication to his craft. Absolutely. Yeah, good fun. And that's always a huge part. And always was, actually, as I said, on many occasion, a duty of the Shanachie, not just to recite songs and poetry and history and the knowledge and the wisdom, but to do it in an entertaining way and to tell a few jokes along the way. Good evening, everyone, and have a great night, and we'll see you, well, next week. In the meantime, you never know. Spontaneous live broadcast from somewhere out in the landscape is always a possibility, especially now that we're heading into summer and the evenings are longer and it's getting better and better. Thank you for joining us. I've enjoyed your company this evening very much so. Actually, great crowd tonight, as it were. Great banter, great back and forth, and great discussion between the thread is actually, the comment thread is literally flying up the screen here. It's when I go to click on a comment to highlight it, for instance, Alan's, just as I try to click it, another 2 or 3 push it up the screen, Yes, I watched that today, and I didn't really understand what type of show it was. I'm going to be on the No Name Trivia Show on Easter Monday at 11 a.m. That's Irish time. That's too early for those of you in the States on the Western. That'll be 3 a.m. for Pacific. But if you're up at 6 o'clock in New York, you might catch it, and I do think they record the episodes. Yes, I'm appearing on the No Name Trivia Show on Facebook, hosted by Joseph McGrail Bateup in Australia. Looking forward to that. Should be a bit of fun. You never know. And something else, perhaps, for you to watch next Monday before we get round to the usual episode. Good night to all. Yes, indeed. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're there. Like and share everything if you can. It helps. And if you really, really want to help and support, do think of becoming a patron of Mythical Ireland. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. For now, we'll see you next week. And slán go fóill Íchawa Kulasov. And most importantly of all, Tó go bud. Get it right, Anthony. Tó go bugge.